I am Mike.
Okay, so we have two General Services Committee members. Well, let's start. We're here to discuss Councilmember Fahey's Resolution 6.2120, a resolution to promote equity and pedestrian safety and mobility by improving snow and ice removal from city sidewalks, street crossings, and bus stops. And a lot of this, also Derek Johnson is present, he's a committee member. A lot of this, of course, was touched on in the meeting, the caucus that we just had with the DGS folks. But Kathy, why don't you explain your resolution and what we hope to accomplish with it.
Okay, this resolution stems from last year's snowstorm. That was also a very bad snowstorm. I forget how many inches, but it was well over 20. But it was also a snowstorm that didn't melt right away, and it stayed on. It got colder, so we ended up with a lot of snow and ice on walks, and we had mounds of snow on the street corners, and there were a lot of complaints. And the Delaware Area Neighborhood Association made it one of their issues, and I believe they wrote a letter to the mayor regarding the problem. And we started to talk about that. It's a true quality of life issue when that happens, when there's mounds of snow on street corners and people, property owners who do not shovel or ice their walks. We have so many people who are disabled in some way or another. We have senior citizens, we have kids who walk to school, a lot of low income folks who don't have the opportunity to drive to work or wherever it is they need to go. And they have to navigate these snowy and icy sidewalks that people aren't taking care of. So I started looking into the issue, and I noticed that some other cities, municipalities who also are up north and have high snowfalls, we're beginning to take a closer look at the issue. And some of them have developed some pilot programs to address the problem. So this is it's not an ordinance, it's a resolution. And the idea is that we should take a closer look at this. I think the city, I've lived here for many, many years now, and we have made so much headway with our snow emergency program and so on, and as far as our streets. But I think that we have to give a greater priority to our walks, and I think we need to have more conversations about it, how we can make that happen. I know I did talk to Sergio and Frank about this last year, and I did let it sit due to the pandemic and so on. But with this most recent snowstorm, it seemed like we should really begin again talking about how we can begin to address it. I also, it's not just the sidewalks and the street corners, but it's also bus stops. CDTA, is doing their bus rapid transport. They've got all these new bus stations. They put in snow melters in their bus stations, but just to get to the bus stops, people will often have to climb over mounds of snow and all that. So it's still an issue. I also talked to people at CDTC, and they have done a lot of, they have a lot of data about pedestrian walkways when they were doing their bicycle improvement plans and so on. They have a lot of data that we could use if we were ever to come up with a plan to begin addressing the city taking over making sure some of our most heavily trafficked walkways are cleared. But again, this is a starting point, and I'm interested in other people's input on this, and also, of course, DGS officials' input too. And I know, Frank, you were going to do a little research on the issue.
I just want to note that we've also been joined by council members Derek Johnson, Awusu Anani, and Joyce Love. And I guess my first question would be, obviously, you know, the mayor talking to Capital District Transportation Authority is a very fine idea, and I'm sure they've had ongoing conversations. And the mayor and staff soliciting input from the community, excellent idea. I guess my question is to take the necessary steps to address, you know, sidewalk cleaning. I assume that that means purchase of some equipment and adding to the budget. So I guess my question to Sergio and to Joe Gleebelhouse would be, you know, how much do you think we should increase the DGS budget for whatever equipment is necessary to do exclusively sidewalks and whatever staff, so that we have that in mind when the budget talks come up, or at B&A, if we have another big storm this season, if we have to go to E&A, do we have some sort of an idea of estimate of how much more we should be budgeted either for necessary equipment or staff for, you know, addressing sidewalk and bus stop and pedestrian safety issues regarding snow?
Okay, Mike, well, let's start. You're muted. You're muted, Sergio.
Oh, Sergio.
Sergio, you're muted.
Before you start, I want to thank Committeewoman Fahey. Last year, you brought this up to our attention, and then you withdrew. You said you guys don't have to go that crazy because of COVID happened. I remember, and I want to thank you for that, because we were like, okay, now what do we do first? So I wanted to thank you for giving us a little bit of room to breathe, and that was definitely worth it, because we did a lot of research, and Frank has brought up things. This is nothing new, nothing that it's not abnormal in Northeast. We called Syracuse, called the different municipalities, and we wanted to get the field. As Councilman O'Brien has brought up, there is going to be an expense to it. Our equipment is too large and will do too much damage to get into but I'll let Frank take it over, and Joe to talk the details on what you can expect in the future.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Kathy. Thank you for giving us the extra time to go through this. So you had identified a couple of municipalities that we should look at, including Syracuse, Rochester. I think there were a couple others. Even in Wisconsin, there was a couple other areas that were not necessarily New York State, and we looked at a lot of them. And what we found was that a lot of it was apples and oranges. Okay. So a couple of them were more rural areas that had farming population, and the farmers would do a lot of the work. In the off season, of course, we don't have that. There was a lot. Syracuse was the one I focused on probably the most. And I found that, they tried it. They tried, and they put quite a bit of money into it as well. I want to say it was like $250,000, $500,000 or something they put into it. And they were looking at hiring a contractor. And they did find a contractor, okay, that did it. I don't know. One of the things that when I called, I called and I spoke to somebody, but I had a bunch of questions, and they said they had to get back to me, and they didn't get back to me. Then when I tried calling back, the guy didn't work there anymore. So it was a little difficult. But one of the things that they have on-street parking in Syracuse, but I couldn't get the answer to, is it the same type of on-street parking that we have? You know what I mean? Because that really is the crux of it. A lot of these municipalities that are more town, that don't have sidewalks, that don't have on-street parking, they can do a lot more removal. They can do a lot more plowing. They can get closer to the curb. We have those, we obviously have those issues, and Joe can talk more about that. But we looked into that, so the first thing we decided was we need to put this out to bid and see if we could find a company that would have that smaller equipment, it would not pull our resources from having to do it, okay? Because we could just immediately, like we're calling in these private contractors for the purposes of plowing and for hauling snow, we would call this contractor in almost immediately. One of the things of your ordinance talked about 24 hours after the end of the snowstorm, where we were looking for a reasonable time to get these crosswalks, these ADA ramps, as we're calling them, okay, as was what we're identifying them as, these ADA ramps, to get them cleaned so that you punching holes through these piles. And it would have to be done multiple times. It wouldn't be one time, because the snow is always going to get piled up again, and we're going to have to go through. So having a contractor on board that did that was what we identified. So Joe put together a very thorough bid spec that went through every scenario and everything that needed to be done. That is out to bid currently. Okay. We have a smaller, this particular bid has a smaller area, what we'll call maybe a pilot area. And that would probably more than likely in the future be expanded. We don't know the extent of what the cost is going to be. We don't know whether or not we'll even get any bidders. But what we solicited over 40 businesses, and they were snow contractors, people that we've used and people that we haven't used that we identified, even though they may not be doing plowing and hauling, but we did give them to the clerk's office, and I do know that they are going to send that out. And then we're following up with some of our contractors that we know we do business with to say, hey, we know that you do our streets, but you also have a couple of these smaller pieces of equipment to punch holes. We got a newer company this year that did some work for us, and they talked about buying us some equipment to do this. So possibly they might bid on it. So we're going to wait to see. We need to wait and see what that comes back, and then we would then have Mike an idea of what that would cost us if we could find it in our budget for an E&A transfer to move it this year to cover the contract. So that would be, once we know, we can have more information to be able to deal with it. The second part of what you're asking is whether or not DGS can handle that and what we would need to do that. I'm going to hand that off to my fellow deputy commissioner, and Joe can explain that. Joe, you're on.
Muted, you're muted.
You're muted.
There we go. It is a bit of a heavy lift in consideration of the staff shortages that we have. I've done enough math and research to know that there are 3,200 ADA crosswalks in the city of Albany. So that is a lot to do. I calculated if we do 5 an hour, you run through all the math, I need about 53 employees to do it in-house. That's not including the equipment, shovels, what have you. Just to do that, I need about 53 people. I haven't done the analysis yet. I'm still waiting for some manufacturer specs to give me throughput information. There is some equipment out there. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in the town of Colony. It's called a multi-hog or a trackless, designed to go up on sidewalks and deal with these smaller areas. They're about $200,000 each. And we have been authorized to purchase one to give it a try.
Well, the multi-hog is going to be used also.
Everywhere, right?
It has a dual, everything that we buy now has a dual thing. So if we can't use it in a crosswalk, we can use it on bridges, which
Right.
is, it won't, the money will not be wasted.
Right.
So our issue, there are a couple of issues and a couple of components that I need everyone to understand. We understand, we get it. One of the issues when we first started this endeavor is if we do it in-house, where do we put the snow? That means in some streets, you might have to lose some parking spaces because we would have to put the snow from the crosswalk into somewhere. We can't put it back on the sidewalk, so we would have to put it somewhere. The other issue is then we would have to haul it and what the cost of that was. So we have done, I think, a very good due diligence in figuring out all the different scenarios that we could possibly think and we could possibly come up with. Because again, we want to be efficient and we want to be, helpful, not losing parking spaces in an area that's already has no parking spaces to begin with. So our best option is for now to wait for the specification to come back. I believe from what I've been talking to different vendors, we're soliciting that the perfect job for this type of typeface, it's a landscaper that has a number of employees that during the winter they don't have to do landscaping because of the snow. And they have the small equipment, they have the small backyard equipment to get into. So we've been asking those targeted businesses to come in and give us a number. Now I understand we're not going to be able to do 3,700 at the first stop. We're going to have to be using targeted areas and see if the program works. But we're definitely we could celebrate the success or having the sidewalk done, which through CEOs, which we saw this year with a large amount of snow, only 57 complaints because the rest were all done. We could grow from here. And again, I appreciate that we were able to go to Syracuse, we were able to Worcester, we were able to go to Wisconsin and compare notes and say, what do you guys do? Because they give us a little bit more of a feel of what needs to be taking place. But we certainly, again, with the shortage of manpower that we have now, we really want to try to farm this out and eventually maybe include it into our plan. But for first, to get it going, I think we're confident that we could get enough contractors to give us a fair price. So.
I wanted to ask the committee, Leah Goldby's been waiting, I think about an hour and a half in the public comment. Would you mind if we take Leah? She's our only person signed up for public comment, I think. Did the other committee members mind hearing from Leah before we ask any more questions to the DGS staff?
No.
Okay. Leah, do you want to go forward?
Sure. Thanks. So thank you. I didn't want to cut anyone off. I just wanted to be sure you knew I was here. So thanks for coming to me, and really appreciate hearing from DGS staff on this. They know that I've been talking to them for 11 years about snow on sidewalks, and we've come a really long way. I mean, when I first came to Albany as a college student in 1986, I was shocked at the state of the sidewalks in this city when it snowed. I did not understand how this city could function because you could not walk on main streets like Clark Street. So it has gotten so much better over the years, and the folks, and it really has gotten better. Like, I'm not just saying it has gotten better over the years, but there is still work to do. And I was so glad to hear that you're looking at the ADA ramps, because I think that has got to be the priority. Sidewalks are important, but the all sidewalks have to be clear. That's absolutely right. But we all know what happens to the ADA ramps, that is the corners, wind up getting plowed in over and over again. And they are the hardest parts to maintain for property owners. So I think that really is a great place to start. And I came in here not knowing that you were actually thinking about doing something. So I'm personally thrilled right now that you're actually talking about taking action that will, I think really move us forward in a positive direction, because this absolutely is, while Councilmember Fahey said it's a quality of life issue, it's a public safety issue, right? I mean, the bottom line is, and I think everybody here agrees, that a person who's riding in a vehicle's life is no more important than a person who has to walk or take public transportation. So, this is an equity issue. This is an ADA compliance issue. I just, thank you for doing this, and that's it. Thanks.
Other council members, any questions, comments? Joyce?
So I'm a little confused. I want Kathy to go back and explain to me because I came on kind of late. So I'm asking you to go back and explain to me what this resolution is about.
Well, it is to, we've made our streets a priority as far as plowing them, and I think we do a good job plowing our streets. But a lot of our residents don't drive, but they still have to get to work, get to school, get to doctor's office. They have to do their business, and it's difficult after a large snowfall, like especially like the one last year that stayed on the ground for a long time. So we had mounds of snow at the street corners. We had walks that weren't shoveled. It was icy. And so I do see it as an equity issue, quality of life issue. I also see it as, it's an economic issue too, because people come to the city of Albany to live because they love the walkable neighborhoods. And a good part of the year, if we've had a lot of snow throughout the winter, it's difficult to get around, and that's a turnoff for people. So that's I thought that our city should take a closer look at what we can do to address that problem.
Okay.
And Frank, and I don't know when you came in, Joyce, but Frank and Sergio have begun looking into this issue and the possibility of a pilot program. They've put out a bid for a contractor to perhaps come in and do certain high use walkways.
Okay.
I think that's what we're talking about here, which is
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Do other council members have comments, questions? Awusu?
Yeah, I just want to thank the sponsor of this resolution. You see something, you have to say something, right? Like, and I believe that this type of resolution is the type of resolution that calls for action, as particularly when you look at it from an equity lens on how we clear up the roads, how we clear up the sidewalks, how we clear up the bus stops. So I want to thank the sponsor for doing that. But also I have a question more so for DGS. And this is there any type of coordination between the school district and DGS when we have a huge snowfall? And the reason why I ask this is, again, the district that I represent is a walkable neighborhood, and many of the kids walk to Pine Hills Elementary, and I get some calls. And sometimes, as much as I enjoy blaming the school district, if there's a street that is ours, I'll say, okay, it's the city of Albany. So I just want to know, during these type of big snowfalls, is there any type of coordination between the school district on making sure that the sidewalks are cleared so a student doesn't have to, walk on the road to get to school? So I just want to ask that. Thank you.
No real coordination with the school, except for they expect, the city to do it, and obviously the residents to do it. So let's say that we have a snowstorm and they allow the kids to go back to school the next day. The law says 24 hours. So the resident, it all depends on the resident and how they feel about getting their snow shoveled and how quickly. And that can impact obviously the student that's walking. I mean, it's a real issue. And there's times when we've had issues with the school district even doing the stuff they're responsible for, and I'm speaking for 23 years being here and dealing with the school district and trying to, we used to have a good working relationship with their maintenance people, and from what I understand, they've cut back a lot of the staff, and unfortunately some stuff doesn't get done. So I would say there's not much.
Yeah, because when I used to drive, used to drive the school bus, and we wouldn't stop on the corners for the kids because the snow was on the corner and the kids were standing on top of the snowbanks, we wasn't allowed to stop by the snowbanks to pick up the kids because it was unsafe. So a lot of times we used to just leave the kids or go back around the corner, and ask them to move down some. But maybe you should have more coordination with the school district, with some of their maintenance people. especially close around the schools.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, if they do their crosswalks, that's 4 less that we have to do.
Correct.
Think about it, you know, they do the 2 sides plus the 2 across. But as Frank said, I think they're in financial, well, like everybody else, they have the staffing that's being reduced quite a bit. And sometimes they call us for assistance.
But Sergio, this goes way back before all this
Yeah,
COVID
yeah.
with the school district.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
Yeah, I blame the school. Well, we won't get into that, but this go way back before COVID. I drove the bus for like maybe 8 years.
Do any other council members have questions, comments? Judy?
Thank you very much. First, I do want to say, you know, I moved to Albany in 1975 for the first time, and it was unreal what we were dealing with back then in terms of snow removal and icy sidewalks. And I share Leah might not have even been born back then, but I share her dismay at having moved here and having experienced that. And I want to say things are so much better, and I really do appreciate it. And your folks, Sergio, I'm sure will recall me, bringing my garbage can out to the street and saying thank you when I'm down at Woodlawn Park. Helping them throw bags into the garbage truck if it happens to be there, helping them throw the sticks into it, and thanking them for their work, the street sweepers, et cetera, the thumbs up all the time. I do appreciate very much all of the workers and how they make our lives better every single day of the year. But I also worked for the Department of Health when smoking, was, allowed every place. And there are some things that people over time take for granted that you need to be asking the questions. And Leah has done a great job during her years on the council of pushing this issue of walkability and how do we make it more walkable. I'm somebody, even 20 years ago wasn't, so firm on my feet. And now, I'm happy that so many people are more conscious of their obligation to clear their sidewalks over time, and that there's been an elevation of this discussion and what we do about it. I also, when my residents are complaining to me within 24 hours of the snowstorm, I'm like, unless you really have to go out, I think everybody really needs to stay in. And in these COVID days, we have a great opportunity for a lot of people to work remotely. And then what I tell them is, instead of using your car, rely on CDTA. Go get on the bus. I know you don't do that all that often. You're used to being in your car, but go get on the bus. Well, then the challenge is, how do you get to the bus? Well, my husband and I live on a corner lot that is very close to New Scotland Elementary School. We make sure that that path is cleared and that crosswalk to the school, in addition to our own crosswalk. But that crosswalk, 4 houses up, is cleared most of the time. Anytime there's something more than 2 or 3 inches. I don't know if my husband did it today, but that is something to help everybody, all the kids get to school, and to be able to help people get on a bus. But I know I'm kind of crazy about those kinds of things, and we don't expect everybody to necessarily be doing that. And I did tell you about the challenges. And I want to say I'm shocked. When you guys were kind of pushing me off saying we're going to be talking about this in this meeting, I had no idea that you guys are actually exploring and looking at how do we focus on these ADA ramps. And I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that you are looking at doing this. And one of the things I have thought about is, should we be creating some sort of improvement district with special assessments for people who live along some of the thoroughfares, to have contractors actually clear all of the sidewalks along New Scotland Avenue, along Western, along, and in some of the major places. But then it does kind of get to be a little unfair to burden those property owners and say, okay, we're going to take care of the snow removal, but you're going to pay the price, when really the whole intent is to benefit everybody. So I favor what you're doing in terms of this, even if it does mean a tax increase, because this is a real important quality of life kind of thing. Wouldn't it be great if we became known as the city where we're really truly walkable, and we have figured out both the enforcement against homeowners and doing that kind of issue, and also these crosswalk and bus stop kinds of issues? That would be great. So I do support the resolution, and I just wanted to chime in and say I'm thrilled and thank you.
Let me just say this, Judy, though, everything is on the table. All right, it will be, as Joe said, he says, what did you say, 54, Joe? 54 positions if we were to do this ourselves. And if we're already down 20 something for the storm, you really need 70, it's just, it could have a very hefty price tag to do it ourselves. If we were to do the entire city, if you do just portions of the city, like we'll probably look to do a pilot in the beginning, but if you just do it, does that become an equity issue that's not fair? Because everybody needs to walk, not just in the commercial districts. So we're going to be looking at a lot of things, and that's why it takes time. That's why we can't just snap our fingers, and that's what we're looking at. So,
well, I understand that it takes time, but just like all the time that people took for granted, and it took a lot of conversation in many years for people to stop having people smoke indoors every place you go, and we now take it for granted. And I understand, and frankly, I've had a lot of people suggest to me about this whole idea. Why don't we do what Burlington does? Why don't we do with, I think it was Rochester that other people mentioned, where the city actually does it. And I'm like, the problem is to have enough staff to do all of that and do it within a couple of days. I don't understand how that would happen. And then people complain. People complain right now about how we do the streets. Now we'll have people complaining about, the sidewalk in front of my house isn't shoveled, or whatever it happens to be. So I have discouraged people from thinking along those lines, because I think we get the job done quicker with regard to most sidewalks if we have the burden be on property owners, and we have them understand that they need to do that, or they could be fined and have the city come along and do it. But the corners, the crosswalks, the problem is not so much just the corners, because like I say, a lot of people in my neighborhood are doing right down to the curb and maybe even a little bit beyond, but then the crosswalks aren't necessarily clear. So, and then the snow does get piled back up in these ADA ramps. So,
Do any other council members have questions, comments? Kathy?
Yes, I just, this is great that you put a bid out, and that we're going to begin to look more closely at this. I just want to say again that if we did look at a targeted area like you're talking about, we could get some help from CDTC in help determining what that area might be, because they do have the information about the most heavily traveled walkways. Could be near schools, could be near commercial areas, and that would be really helpful. And it would also, if we did go in this direction, I think people would understand when you make that decision, you're going to start on a small area and do major pathways. So, and I also think I'd like to, at some point, maybe we could, I mean, because really CDTA should be part of this conversation too. And you mentioned the school district. So maybe there's some other partners here who could give us some input, important input on how to proceed. Just a thought. I'm just trying to think about any next steps and how we might follow up.
But even with that, I think we would have I think your resolution is founded well enough that we could take a vote on it tonight to recommend
Yeah,
it.
make a motion.
Yeah,
Before and again, I want to thank everybody. I saw committee won't do shade. I have a hands up, but I just want to, let's stop walking before we run. Let's see what the contract, what this bid brings out. We also have to look at different things. One of the things we looked at is, I know Joe looked at Montreal, how they do their snow removal. I looked at European city where they have the actual handicap ramp that's solar power by electric, so that there's heat on it. So that's maybe just something in the future that as we pave new streets, that's something that we can implement into the street program. This is not just one take a look and clean up the snow and make it accessible. It's a comprehensive plan, but we need to begin to start with, see what the options are, minimally what the costs are, and then grow from there. So we welcome the suggestion, and we certainly look at to do you right. And our next meeting, DGS meeting, we might have to bring another meeting to get the results from those openings.
And do you have a sense of when do you hope, are you going to get these bids back, Sergio? When do you think it's
We're
a good time?
contractually bound. We're contractually bound for what? 20 days they have to be out.
No, the bids come back on the, let me see, they come back on the 19th of February.
Right.
So on the 19th of February, the bid will come back through contracts and supply. If we have successful bidders, we'll then go through it. We'll go through with a fine tooth comb, make sure that it meets all of our specifications. And then we would look and see what the prices are. Now, the way that Joe structured this bid is it's an hourly thing, correct, Joe? It's
That's
hourly.
correct. Time materials, yes.
So we won't know, to Mike's point, we won't know how much money is going to be needed. We can try to take a storm. I don't know that we use Gale as the storm, right? I don't think we use that storm because it was huge, but maybe you do. Maybe we decide to use that as a thing and do a what if we had to clean the sidewalks that we're going to identify, or the ramps we're going to identify, they have to be cleaned based on their price. That's our what if per storm, right? And say we need to make sure we can find that money and then go from there. So that would be the next step there.
Discussion also has to be, do we want to implement this at every snowstorm? Or do we want to make sure that, after 6 inches, that also drives the cost down. I mean, 1 or 2 inches snowstorm, I don't think is an issue, but a 12, 20, 26.5 is an issue. So we need to set some parameters and say, all right, after 10 inches of snow, yes, we will do this crosswalk. So those are all things that, but at least we got the ball rolling, and at least we're talking it and bringing it to the forefront and see where this takes us. But I'm excited about it.
Mike,
I'm
I
excited
think
about it, and I'm looking to bring this to to the NICOM and show them, so this is what can be done. I'm excited about it.
Okay, that's terrific.
Mike?
Thank you for all your
Judy?
work on this.
So
Judy had a question.
I'm realizing I have a constituent who's going to be upset if I don't mention this. Has there been any outreach to or any conversations with the sheriff's office regarding the potential of using work release inmates for this kind of project?
It would need specialized equipment to do this. I mean, if you're going to go into these ADA ramps with these piles, you're going to need some sort of equipment to punch into this and clean it. If, let's be honest, if shovels were good enough to go through these areas, all right, if shovels were good enough, we wouldn't be having this conversation because more residents at the corner could do it. And I know firsthand, because we've dealt with that program, they're not allowed to use any heavy equipment. Okay. Even if we provide, and then if we had to provide it, we'd have to be on site to drop it off. And so one of the things that we achieved with CEO, because they're doing some sidewalk cleaning for us, they're doing where they might use a snow blower, possibly, where they're doing lot cleanups where they need mowers and things of that nature. We provide them with it. They have their own trailer, and we provide them with tools that they borrow from us, basically, that we loan them for the season, and they go out and do it. But they're fully, their grouping is fully responsible for it. They've got a supervisor with them at all times. So using the prisoners, so to speak, are a great idea, because they're good workers. I mean, I've seen some of those workers, they will clean things off, but hand tools. And with everything that we do here, we would definitely need more powerful tools.
So
Right.
does any other council member want to comment, or does anyone want to make a motion in support?
Yeah. I would like to
resolution?
make a motion.
I'll second.
I'd like to make a motion to move this resolution out of committee with a favorable recommendation.
And I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion on that, or are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Okay, it looks like unanimous for the committee members here. So thank you very much. And we do appreciate the work that General Services does, even though maybe need to be more vocal about it, but I know that last storm was a big hassle, and even this recent storm, you guys were right around the plows on my street and neighboring streets, so we appreciate it. But I think this is good, and I'm glad you guys have done your homework. And
I have a question. How do we know? I guess Michelle will give us the date for our next meeting so we can discuss.
Yeah,
how the bids came in.
I'll reach out to
Okay.
probably you or Frank and just see where you're at.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
After February 20th, we could start looking at the bids.
okay.
Yeah. Because obviously, let's say the scenario is we don't get any bids, then it's going to a whole other conversation of how do we get 54 people put on there, and how do we do? So there's a
We don't
lot of
wanna do
other
that.
things, right? Exactly. There's a lot of other things to discuss. So again, we're going to need to have another meeting to discuss that when we find out.
okay.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks very much.
Possibly a meeting in March, early March,
Mid-March, I would say.
mid-March, okay.
That gives us a couple of weeks to make a decision and then award it, and we can have that conversation at that point.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank
And
you, everybody.
And the
for
real
your
work begins.
Then the real work begins, right?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
for
you.
your
Thank you,
work.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Meeting
Good night.
adjourned.
Good night.